People always imagine surveyors working in the mountains or along beautiful stretches of coastline, standing nolly against the horizon with a tripod and scope. The truth is, most of the time we're standing alone in a field that doesn't deserve anyone's attention. Empty, sun-bleached, littered with scrap metal or half-dead hedgerows choking in plastic bags. Places waiting to become something else. That morning was no different. A wide, flat stretch of land on the outskirts of a dead-end town. The kind of site where the council had already approved development before anyone bothered sending me to check for subsurface problems. You'd think if they were serious about health and safety, they'd prioritize this step earlier, but half my work comes down to ticking boxes after decisions have been made. I parked my truck on the edge of the field, grabbed my gear, and hiked out into the waist-high grass with my boots soaking up yesterday's rain. Usual checklist, boundary confirmation, soil composition, utilities, elevation consistency. My kit was standard. A total station for accuracy, a handheld GNSS receiver, and the ground-penetrating radar to check beneath the surface. Expensive tools treated better than my own health. I locked everything methodically. That's how I worked. I follow process, keep my paperwork tight, never cut corners, even when I know it won't matter to anyone but me. The first couple of hours passed like they always did, slow, methodical, solitary. I made my passes, marking coordinates, noting anomalies. There were a few small inconsistencies right off. My compass readings jittered by a few degrees more than they should have, and the GNSS had a tendency to flicker, struggling to keep a solid fix on satellite locks. That happens sometimes near old landfill sites or when there's a high iron content in the soil, though the maps didn't show anything to suggest it here. Still, it bothered me. I hate noise in my data. It nags at me. Some surveyors fudge through and write it off as margin of error. I'm not wired like that. I don't like unresolved questions sitting in my reports. I made another loop around the perimeter, double-checking points I'd already marked. That's when I noticed it. Something ahead, near the center of the field, something tall enough to break through the monotony of the grass. Something that hadn't been there when I walked this stretch an hour ago. At first glance, it appeared to be utility infrastructure, possibly a temporary rig for which paperwork had been forgotten. I moved closer, but my chest tightened with a low, creeping sense that this wasn't right. It wasn't a cabinet or a drill rig or any kind of construction I'd seen before. It was an elevator, freestanding, about 8 feet tall, twin doors, a control panel fixed beside them with a single, backlit button, glowing steady green. No markings, no company logos, no rust or grime. It looked brand new, modern, powered. I walked a slow circle around it, half expecting to find scaffolding or a generator, or even loose cables snaking out of the grass. Nothing. The thing was planted into the earth, rooted like a permanent structure, but the ground around it was undisturbed. No tire tracks, no footprints, except my own. No sign of heavy equipment having moved through. If something had planted this here, they'd done it without disturbing a single inch of soil. And that was impossible. Things don't just appear fully installed without a trace. That wasn't possible. Pulled out my phone, flipped through the site reports again just to be sure. Nothing listed. No prior development, no underground facilities, nothing built or planned until this survey was complete. The last formal record of this land showed farmland subdivided and sold off decades ago before elevators like this even existed. Still there, it was. I circled the elevator slowly, taking it in from every angle. Up close, it looked even stranger than it had from a distance. The surface was brushed steel, but the kind you'd expect to see in an old office block or hospital, clean enough to show a dull reflection of my boots in the lower panels. No signs of age or weather damage, despite the rain that had come the day before. The seams between the doors were sharp and precise. The button panel beside it hummed with quiet power, a single green light steady beside the down arrow. There wasn't a scratch on it. It made no sense. Modern elevator systems require power, maintenance shafts, connection to something. Yet here it was, humming quietly in the middle of nowhere. The more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself there had to be a reason. Maybe someone had started a legal development without permits. Maybe there was a corporate project buried beneath me, one they'd gone to a lot of trouble to hide, if. So my job wasn't just to take soil samples and boundary readings anymore. Part of surveying is reporting anomalies. Unauthorized construction had to be documented. That thought settled the debate for me. Curiosity played its part, sure, but this wasn't about curiosity anymore. This was about liability, about making sure the people who came after me didn't stumble into something dangerous because I hadn't done my due diligence. I stepped up to the doors and rested my finger on the call button again. I pressed it. I don't really know what I expected to happen when I pressed the button. Maybe nothing. Maybe for the light to flicker out and remind me that what I was looking at couldn't possibly be real. What I didn't expect was for the elevator to answer. A low hum and a faint tremor beneath my boots, the machinery kicked into life. Somewhere below, cables tightened, gears turned, and the elevator rose, smooth into place. The doors opened without hesitation, revealing a clean, empty car waiting for me. The interior smelled faintly metallic, the sterile scent of something mechanical and unused. I stepped forward just far enough to study the panel inside. The floor selection was simple. Ground level marked as G. Below that, floors labeled -1. Through 7 only the first basement level was lit. The button glowed steadily and palely, inviting me down. For a moment, I stood there, weighing it in my mind. This wasn't standard procedure. No one would expect me to step into an elevator in the middle of a field, and no one would question me if I flagged it in the report and walked away. But what if there was something down there? Some illegal structure, a liability hidden beneath the earth. Unauthorized builds aren't exactly well known for their amazing structural integrity. If I left it unchecked and something happened later, it would come back on me. Part of this job is making sure the ground is safe before others build on it. That responsibility doesn't just stop because something feels wrong. 1 floor. That was all. I could take a quick look and confirm it was an old maintenance space or something more recent. Just 1 level to investigate. Standard due diligence. I stepped inside, pressed the button for -1, and felt the car lurch gently as it began to sink into the earth. The car jutted as it reached his stop. The door slid open, and for a moment I thought I stepped into a time capsule. The floor stretched out ahead in grim, flickering light lined with sagging cubicle walls and peeling linoleum tiles. Exposed concrete framed the ceiling where aging fluorescent. Strips hummed without pattern, casting intermittent shadows across the space. It felt abandoned, not ruined, not collapsed, just left as though everyone had walked out at once and never returned. I moved forward cautiously. The air was thick with the smell of old coffee and stale paper. My boots echoed against the floor, drawing attention to the silence that pressed in from every side. A small break room sat off to my left. Its glass panels smeared with grease and handprints so faded that they looked fossilized. Inside, chairs were pulled out as if waiting for people to return. On one table sat a styrofoam cup, half full. The coffee inside had grown a film of scum. The cigarette burned in an ashtray nearby, smoke still lifting in a lazy spiral. I stood there, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. There was no power to this place, No feed connected it to the surface grid, and no generator noise hummed behind the walls. My scanner confirmed it. 0 utilities, 0 heat signatures. And yet here it was, lights on, smoke rising, something half drunk, sitting warm, in a cup. I moved further in, examining a row of desks. Paperwork littered them, yellowed with age, but still legible. Maintenance logs, requisition orders for supplies, mundane office debris from a company that didn't exist on any records I'd been given. One memo caught my eye more than the rest. It was stapled to a corkboard in the corner of the room. Strict protocol. No unauthorized personnel permitted below Level 3 under any circumstances. Maintenance team reports must be signed off on prior to departure. Another sign, more official, more permanent, showed a cartoon worker in a hard hat giving a thumbs up under bold red text. Always follow maintenance protocols below Level 3. I felt the first twist of a knees in my chest. This wasn't some abandoned structure forgotten by paperwork. This was built deliberately, organized, planned for depths the surface had no record of. I returned to the elevator faster than I intended. My finger went straight to the ground floor button. I pressed it, waited, pressed it again harder. The button remained dark beneath my thumb. No response. I tried holding it down, willing the doors to close. Nothing happened. I stepped back, heart climbing higher in my throat. I wasn't stuck. Not yet. Maybe the elevator system was wired to operate sequentially. That would make sense if this was an old security protocol, restricting access one level at a time until clearance was confirmed. The only button lit now was for -2. I checked my phone for a dash of hope, but of course, no signal. One floor at a time, no other path forward. That was the logic I grabbed onto, the reasoning that kept me from losing my nerve. If I wanted to get back to the surface, I'd have to reach the bottom and hope the controls reset. That was how these things worked, wasn't it? If it wasn't, pretending made it easier to calm down. The doors closed without my touch. The button for -2 glowed steadily, and the elevator began to descend again. I braced myself. Whatever was down there, I'd see it soon enough. When the doors opened again, I thought for a moment that the elevator had broken entirely. This couldn't be another floor beneath the corporate basement. This couldn't belong underground at all. I stepped out into what looked like a house. A complete, fully furnished suburban home, the kind built in the 90s with wood paneling and patterned wallpaper that hadn't aged well. A lamp hummed softly in the corner. Yellowed blinds flitted pale light under carpet worn down to the threads. Somewhere, a clock to tick steadily. The air smelled faintly of burnt toast and old cleaning products. It was the smell of someone's daily routine, long since abandoned, but somehow still hanging on. I walked forward, drawn through a narrow hallway, into a living room that could have belonged to any tied suburban family from 30 years ago. Frame photographs lined the mantel. I picked one up, turned it toward me. My breath caught. It looked like an inane family portrait, the posing of an idealistic nuclear family. But the more I stared, the stranger it got. I wasn't sure if it started. Normally all was shifting so slowly it was imperceptible. But the faces held uncanny features, eyes slightly shifted, smiles that didn't hold an ounce of happiness. All of it culminated in my gut sinking. Each second I studied it, I put it away, hoping it was a one-off, and looked through others, hoping one would hold a clue as to where I was, but each had the same effect. My stomach feeling acidic from the stress. Nothing bad happened, but my body felt like it had a near-death experience simply from standing in one spot. I couldn't help but move. I checked my phone. No surface, no time displayed on the lock screen. The battery icon remained frozen at 82%. For a moment, I stood in the middle of that room and listened. Somewhere in the house, water dripped slowly, a rhythmic patter that echoed through unseen pipes. Beyond the windows, nothing but raw concrete, pressed against the glass. No hint of anything existing beyond the walls, just blank grey, featureless and absolute. There were no doors leading out, no stairs going up or down, only hallways that curved around into the same rooms again, looping quietly as if this space existed in fragments, repeating themselves over and over. I found myself back where I started without realizing how I had gotten there. The elevator stood open, waiting. Its soft interior light the only thing breaking the dimness. The ground floor button still remained dark. Only -3 now glowed as if daring me to press it. I hesitated. Nothing here had threatened me. Nothing had tried to keep me. Yet the weight of something unseen pressed deeper into my chest. This place wasn't dangerous, not yet. But it wasn't meant to be found. I stepped back inside. The doors closed, and I felt the drop begin again. The doors opened onto a corridor tiled in an institutional pale blue, meant to calm nerves but rarely succeeding. The walls were clean in places, peeling in others. The lights overhead buzzed inconsistently, casting uneven strips of cold fluorescent. Across the floor, I recognized the smell immediately. Antiseptic, old metal, something faintly chemical beneath it all. A hospital or something built to resemble one. I moved forward slowly, stepping past abandoned gurneys and carts of surgical tools laid out in neat, untouched rows. Through a set of swinging doors, I found the operating theatre. A large observation window loomed above it. Glass cracked in several places. Below, the room held the chaos of an interrupted procedure. Her body rested on the table beneath a circle of bright surgical lamps. Blood crusted the sheets beneath it, though the edges glistened wet under the harsh light. Tubes still fed clear liquid through hanging IV bags, the fluid running with a slow, steady drip, despite no one watching. Metal trays held bone saws, scalpels, and rib spreaders, all laid out with a precision of professionals who had no intention of cleaning up after themselves. I approached the table. The body was covered from the neck down, but even under the sheet I could see the wrongness of its shape. Too thin in some places, too bloated in others, limbs bent at angles that didn't match how bone should move. Beside the table, a clipboard hung from a rail. I flipped through the patient files without thinking, scanning lines of text my brain struggled to process. Different dates, different injuries, gunshot wounds, blunt force trauma, surgical extraction, organ failure, brain death. Some of them couldn't be possible. One listed dissection while still alive. Another marked the procedure as completed despite a date that hadn't happened yet. Something shifted behind the far curtain. I froze. The movement was slow, steady. A shadow pressed against the fabric. A shape too tall to be human, too thin to belong in this world. The curtain rippled as it moved behind it, tracing a careful, deliberate path along the wall. The surgical lamps flickered overhead. One by one they blinked out, plunging parts of the room into uneven darkness. Footsteps echoed across the tile, soft at first, then louder, coming from more than one direction. I couldn't see anything in the corners of the room where the light had died, but I could hear breath rasping from somewhere close, heavy and wet. I didn't wait to see what would step through the curtain. I backed toward the elevator, my hands shaking as I reached for the button. The doors opened faster than I expected. I stepped inside and slammed my palm against the panel. Only -4 was lit now. The doors closed before the footsteps could reach me, and I felt the car sink lower into the earth. Out of habit, I reviewed what had just happened. Each floor before had been empty, unsettling, but empty. I had grown complacent that this strange structure were just glimpses into a maddened mind that nothing would manifest. But I was proven wrong, and I feared what the rest of the floors held. When the doors opened again, the smell hit me first. Stagnant water mixed with mildew and something acid beneath it all. The light overhead flickered weakly, revealing tiled floors that were lost beneath a layer of black water which rippled with slow, unnatural motion. I wanted to just stay in the elevator car and wait for the next button to light up, but no matter how long I stood there, frozen by mental exhaustion, none of the buttons lit up. I was forced to move forward. I stepped out and felt the chill soak through my boots. The water reached my calves, thick and oily enough to leave a sheen on my skin. I stood in what once had been a shopping mall. Storefronts lined the wide corridor. The neon signs burned out or replaced with names that made my head ache to read. Clothing displays featured rows of shirts and jackets I recognized from my own closet, but the cuts were off and the colors bled together where the seams met. Every logo looked almost correct, but shifted when I tried to focus on the details. Mannequins filled the stalls and hallways, half submerged, their blank faces aimed toward the water's surface. Some bobbled gently as if breathing beneath the black depths, though it could have just been the ebb and flow of the water. Others leaned against the glass walls, hands pressed flat, as if trying to force their way out. I moved carefully between them, watching their stillness for any sign of change. One blinked as I passed, another turned its head just enough for me to catch the movement from the corner of my eye. The light above hummed louder, casting the water in a dull, sickly glow. As I glanced down, my reflection stared back. Not just stared, moved. It looked like a second version of me beneath the water, watching with calm indifference. When I stepped forward, it stayed still until it shifted fast through the water, no longer overlapping with my reflection. An off-white blur moving through the water. Another mannequin. The water never settled from when it moved. Something was happening. The water began to rise. I could feel the pull against my legs, dragging me down inch by inch. Shelves and signage shifted with groaning protests, sucked towards some unseen drain beneath the floor. Beneath the noise, something moved faster now, circling me. Unseen, but close enough to disturb the mannequins as it passed. They bobbed in, its wake, heads dipping below the surface, one by one. I turned toward the elevator, forcing myself through the thickened current. The water clawed at my legs. Every step felt heavier than the last. The mannequin that had blinked now floated face. Down in front of me, blocking my path, I shoved past it without looking back. The elevator waited, doors open, light spilling under the water's black surface. I pushed forward with everything I had left. Something brushed against my ankle. I didn't look down. I threw myself into the elevator just as the water surged higher, slapping against the threshold with enough force to splash across the floor. My hand hit the panel in blind desperation, fingers smearing wet across the buttons until one responded beneath my palm. I didn't even see which one it was until the doors groaned shut, sealing the dark water outside with a hollow metallic thud. Something heavy struck the doors from the other side. Not fists, not hands, something deeper, something slower. The whole car trembled beneath the impact. I pressed my back into the corner as the water drained from the elevator car, chest heaving, soaked through and shivering. My eyes found the panel on instinct. -6 was lit now, steady and silent, waiting to take me further down. I felt my stomach twist. For a few seconds I thought about the situation I was in. Each time moving on threw me into more peril, but staying was a death sentence. It felt like a choice of a fast death or a death of 1,000 cuts. Each descent was closer to whatever waited at the bottom, but there wasn't a choice. The ground floor wasn't coming back. This elevator only moved in one direction. The elevator opened into darkness, not the kind of shadow that comes from a power outage, but real, endless, black stretching high above a canopy of silent trees. It wasn't a room. It wasn't even an illusion of a room. It was a forest. The air was cold, damp with pine and rot. Dirt crunched underfoot. Damp leaves clung to my boots, a full forest planted beneath the earth. No walls, no horizon, no stars. I stepped out slowly, flashlight sweeping across tangled branches and leaning trunks. The beam felt thinner than before, weaker. The darkness swallowed everything beyond a few steps ahead. I knew this place. Not exactly. Not the details, but the shape of it. The way the trees leaned in too close. The way the trails led nowhere or looped. I dreamed this place as a kid over and over again. Always this forest, always this sky, pitch black with no stars. Something had pulled it from the back of my mind and made it real. Somewhere far off, I heard something move. Not a loud crash, just the soft drag of something tall rushing through the undergrowth. I didn't call out, didn't even whisper. I just moved forward one step at a time toward a trail barely wide enough for me to pass. Branches clawed at my arms and face. No wind, no birds, just that steady, distant shifting, always behind the trees, always out of sight. I found signs of others. A half-buried compass with a casing cracked open. A metal clipboard snapped in half. A surveyor's pole leaning against the tree snapped at the base. A crushed water bottle still sealed, still full. Whatever had been here before me hadn't lasted long. The path narrowed, the trees got thicker, my flashlight caught movement just beyond reach. Something thin, impossibly tall, watching, never closer, never retreating, always in the corner of my eye. Then it moved. No sound, no warning. It blurred through the trees, straight toward me. I ran, branches whipped to my face, roots snagged my ankles. I didn't care. I sprinted through the black, lungs burning, flashlights swinging wildly. Then something touched me. Just for a second, cold fingers brushed the back of my neck. I dropped the flashlight, dove forward and rolled into a clearing. No trees, no walls, just a pair of metal elevator doors, standing upright in the dirt with no shaft, no structure to hold them. They opened. I didn't think. I didn't look back. I ran through them and hid the panel. As the doors began to close, I saw it again, a figure impossibly tall, almost human, but stretched wrong, watching from the tree-ine. Then the door sealed and the button for -7 lit up. I leaned back, trying to catch my breath. My neck still burned where it had touched me. Not a cut, not a bruise, but something had left a part of itself there. And I was taking it with me to the final floor. The descent -7 felt longer than the others. The elevator groaned through the shaft, each passing second stretching my nerves tighter. I closed my eyes, trying to control my breathing. It wasn't working. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted out, like it already knew I wasn't making it back to the surface. I couldn't shake the thought that I had already passed the point where people stop escaping places like this. Whatever rules I thought I understood When I stepped into the elevator, didn't matter anymore. Each floor hadn't just been stranger than the last. They'd been an escalating threat. By the time the doors opened again, I was prepared to see hell itself waiting. What greeted me instead was silence. Silence wrapped in dust and concrete. I didn't step far from the elevator at first. My instinct told me to turn around, press whatever button would bring me back up, and never come down again. I hadn't trusted this place from the start, but now it felt worse than a mistake. It felt final. I turned back and pressed the ground level button. Nothing happened. I hit it again, this time harder. I jabbed every button on the panel one after the other. If I couldn't get back to the surface, I felt the other floors would be safer than this one. Any of them. G stayed dark. The numbers below -1 gave no reaction at all. Only -7 glowed steady and silent. I waited, hoping the doors might shut on their own, that the car might pull me out of here without asking permission. The doors stayed open. The lights inside the car flickered once, then dimmed. I stepped back, breathing hard. My throat felt tight, as if the air down here had thickened the longer I stood in it. I knew, without needing to say it out loud, that this elevator wasn't going to take me anywhere, not anymore, not until it wanted to. If I wanted to leave, I wasn't going back the way I came. That thought crawled under my skin and settled in the pit of my stomach. My only way forward meant stepping deeper into the floor that would surely kill me, into whatever waited. I stepped out into a vast cavern of unfinished construction. Poured concrete stretched in every direction, cracked and splintered where support. Beams stood half embedded into the ceiling. Scaffolding loomed in twisted sections. Some bolted upright, others collapsed in tangled heaps. Tower lights stood in clusters, but none of them worked. Pale bulbs hung dead and cold. The only illumination came from the elevator itself, and a few scattered work lamps running on a circuit I couldn't see. My boots crunched across grit and broken tile. Tools lay abandoned across the floor. No brands, no markings, just shapes worn smooth from use. A sledgehammer, bolt cutters, coils of wire. None of it belonged to any company I'd ever heard of. Blueprints lit a drafting table near the center of the space, pinned beneath rusted clamps. I glanced down and felt my stomach turn. The designs weren't possible. Stairwells that curved into themselves, doors without hinges, rooms connected in ways geometry shouldn't allow. One diagram showed a space labeled habitation unit, but there were no entrances drawn, no exits either. Another detail called the observation chamber, stage 3, where dozens of small circles crowded the corners, each labeled as a camera. The space itself consisted of a single chair, bolted to the center. I flipped through more pages. The plans grew worse. One room bore no markings except the title, scrolled in handwriting that looked Rush, your replacement. Another blueprint, detailed. A pit described only as depth unknown but showed bones layered through the black beneath it, spreading outward in impossible spirals. My throat tightened. I understood now. I had been moving towards something by design, not a mistake, not an accident, a process. This wasn't a ruin or a forgotten place. This was construction in progress, tailored, evolving, unfinished, only because whoever built it hadn't yet decided how to finish me, or whoever this place was designed for. I moved carefully. Even half-built, this place wasn't safe. Gaps in the floor dropped into black voids that seemed to have no end. Rebar jutted from concrete at angles sharp enough to impale. Scaffolding leaned at unstable slants. One wrong step, and I would vanish into the dark beneath. More than once, I thought I heard movement above me, something scraping across the girders. I refused to look up. The sense of being watched grew heavier with every step. Lights flickered, when none should have worked, illuminating paths I hadn't seen before, then vanishing the second I turned away. The labyrinth rearranged itself. I was sure of it. Hallways ended where they shouldn't. Walls appeared where gaps had been moments earlier. Through it all, I kept moving. I had to. Standing still felt worse than any danger I could see. I found a service elevator tucked into a corner where no structure should have allowed space for it. Smaller than the other, older manual controls behind a greater door that groaned as I pulled it open. One button labelled to surface in worn metal letters. For a moment I hesitated, relief weird with dread. I understood what this place had been built to become. If it had been finished, there wouldn't have been a door waiting for me at all. There would have been a pit, a chair, a box with my name on it. And I couldn't help but wonder if this tiny glimpse of hope was another test to fail. But I had no other choice. I pulled the lever. The elevator shuddered into motion, rising with agonizing slowness. As the construction site fell away, beneath me I didn't feel safe, I felt lucky. Luck was thin protection. But for now, it would have to be enough. When the service elevator doors opened, I stepped out into silence. The air felt colder than it had when I arrived. The wind moved through the grass with a soft rustle, empty of any sound but nature and my breathing. No buildings, no elevator shaft rising from the dirt. Just the field, empty and ordinary, stretching out under a sky too grey to tell time by. I stood there for a long time, unable to move. My boots sank slightly into the soft earth. And I let everything go slack. My hands, my thoughts, my fear. It was drained out of me in waves, leaving behind a numbness that felt worse in its own way. The gear I had carried down was gone. The clipboard I clutched through every descent hung limp at my side. My paperwork was still blank. I could not write down what had happened because I did not know how to explain it even to myself. For a moment, I believed I had imagined it all, that some exhaustion or sickness had cracked open a space in my mind and let this happen inside it. That I'd never gone down, never found those rooms waiting beneath me, that I would walk back to the truck and drive home and forget. Then I heard it tick. The sound cut through the silence, clean and sharp. I turned toward where the elevator had been, expecting to see nothing. A mechanical groan followed, cables pulling taut beneath the soil that showed no sign of disturbance. The car I had just emerged from was slowly descending back down. The sound of weight moving downward pulled deeper into something unseen. For a heartbeat, I told myself it was automatic, a fail-safe returning the car to its resting point. But another thought crawled into my chest and rooted there. What if something had called it back down? And if so, was it coming back up? I didn't wait to find out. The spell broke and my legs moved before my mind caught up. I walked fast, then faster, pushing through the grass until I saw my truck waiting untouched at the edge of the field. I climbed inside, slammed the door shut, and gripped the wheel until my knuckles burned white. The clipboard lay in the passenger seat, paperwork blank. It would stay that way. I could not explain this. Not to my boss, not to myself, not to anyone. Out in the field, the wind kept blowing. I sat behind the glass, staring at the empty place, where the elevator had been, waiting for the sound of it returning to pull me under all over again, and after a breath, I left.